Congratulations! You're the owner of a Corellian YT-1300 light freighter, the ship made famous by Han Solo and his Millennium Falcon. Now, with the Millennium Falcon 3D Owner's Guide, you'll be able to see all the personal modifications that made this ship a legend. In graphic detail, you'll be able to peel away layer by layer each of the ship's core components. Come on, let's take a look. Under armaments, you will see the Millennium Falcon is not your everyday stock light freighter. The ship is armed with maximum firepower, with quad laser cannons, concussion missiles, and a hidden underbelly blaster cannon.
Punch it!
Under defense, reinforced armored plating and advanced shielding ensure the Falcon escapes any encounter without a scratch.
Chewie, get us out of here!
Under propulsion, the ship has got it where it counts. Hey, it's a ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs! Under piloting, the Falcon features adjustable seat and cockpit controls fit for everyone from a princess to a Wookiee. For longer trips through hyperspace, check out the crew quarters, where the ship is fitted with all the comforts of home. Under cargo, the ship's capacity lets you transport just about anything.
Boy, it's lucky you had these compartments.
I use them for smuggling. I never thought I'd be smuggling myself in them.
This is just a sampling of what's in store for you in this Ultimate Millennium Falcon reference. Life support, escape pods, tractor beams, hyperdrive. Every cutout is meticulously illustrated down to the most minute detail. Together, they create a stunning 3D view of the ship. So make the jump to Lightspeed and get your Millennium Falcon 3D Owner's Guide today!
Hi everybody and welcome to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perone and today we are going to be discussing a convention we went to this summer. On August 15th and 17th, we attended Connecticut ComiCONN. Now this was held at the Webster Bank Arena in Connecticut, and it is what you would consider to be a mid-size convention. It was held at a pretty big arena. It was, a professional sports arena, an indoor arena, and the way that it's laid out is that when you walk in, the entire area where they usually have vendors and bathrooms and that sort of thing around the arena, that was lined with tables of certain dealers and certain artists. But then when you walk into the actual arena itself, where they actually do play sports games and sports events, the floor was completely covered in a dealer area, like a floor dealer area. One side, some of the sides also had some of their guests doing autograph signing and that sort of thing. And while we were there on Friday and Sunday of the event, we were able to attend a few panels and talk to a few of the guests here and there, get some autographs, and even talk to the promoter. So this starts off with a conversation I had with Ryder Windham. He is a writer who has been doing a lot of Star Wars books. And specific reason why I wanted to talk to him is because he is one of the people that put together the Haynes technical manuals for Star Wars, both the Millennium Falcon and the Death Star one. And as you guys probably know, who listen to our show regularly, we did a 2-part episode not too long ago just about the Falcon alone. So I remember I really enjoyed the book, and it was a great source for being able to put that show together. And, again, as a fanboy, there's a lot of aspects of that I'm always asking questions about or theorizing. Well, where is this located? And where is that located? And how does this function? Well, this is one of those people that could hopefully answer some of those questions. I did get to ask him at one point off mic if he was working on any new Haynes manuals, for Star Wars, because I'm such a big fan. And he said that he was working on something, but he could not talk about it at this point, which means it could be anything. It could be nothing. It could happen. It could not happen. But my personal theory, based on the run-up that we are heading towards the new Star Wars films and the fact that Rebels is already out, my guess as a non-insider, and I cannot be more of a non-insider, is that it might be an X-Wing book. That is my guess, and that is my hope, actually, because as you'll hear later during the panel, I asked him a question about something having to do with an X-Wing fighter, of how certain things functioned, and he tried to kind of give me an answer, and it was kind of like answering a question without really giving me the super details, but actually giving me something to chew on. So I'm, crossing my fingers, hoping that if they do put out a book, it will be an X-Wing book this time around. So up first, we have a quick little interview I did with him at his table where he was signing his books, where I was able to ask him a couple of questions. And then that is followed by the actual panel that he had. It was him basically doing a retrospective of, his career with Star Wars books, and then he opened it up for Q&A from the audience, and I was able to also ask him another question from that. Specifically having to do with the Millennium Falcon book and even the Death Star book, but the Falcon book, did it derive from the first book, the actual 3D book that you put out?
In part. I mean, the first Millennium Falcon project I worked on was for Star Wars Blueprints, the Ultimate Collection, and that was for DK Publishing. And I worked on the blueprints for the Falcon with the artists Chris Reif and Chris Trevis. And based on that experience, we got an offer to work on the 3D Owner's Guide, right. And that was for Becker and Mayer. But then Scholastic picked up the publishing rights for that, and it wasn't long after we did that book that we got the offer from Haynes Manuals to do that Falcon. And what was really nice to know was that Del Rey had the North American rights for the Haynes Manual, and there was an editor, I was told that an editor at Del Rey said, why are we doing a manual about the Millennium Falcon? Because Ryder Windham and Chris Trevis and Chris Reif, they've already done a book about the Falcon that was published by Scholastic. And the editor was informed, yeah, but Ryder Windham and Mr. Trevis and Mr. Reif, they will be working on the Haynes manual. And the editor said, oh, well, in that case, yeah, we should do that. So that was pretty sweet. But I mean, as far as we relied on everything from the Brian Daley novels, the Han Solo trilogy, to various West End Games books. We drew a lot of information from those, as well as previously published blueprints, or schematics. So it was a very research-intensive project.
Are you able to not only add material that you might have already done before, but also add new material? Is that okay with your publishers to add new material?
It's every time we add new material, it's not for the sake of adding new material. It's more specifically, we think, oh, this would be an interesting way to explain. I mean, it's not so much to leave our mark on the ship. I mean, we want to, if we think, oh, this would be an interesting thing, here's something, here's some part of the ship or some piece of technology that is mentioned. Maybe we can get an illustration of that for the first time. But also everything that we do, it has to be approved by Lucasfilm so that when we submit new information, it's all footnoted. I explain what's new and why we're introducing it, and Lucasfilm generally trusts that, yeah, we're doing this work to, when we add something, it's not for kicks. I mean, it's.
Is it more difficult for you to write a fiction novel that's a traditional story, or doing something like a manual where you're supposed to take the approach of it being nonfiction, very technical, very precise?
Each one is a different challenge, as far as the degree of difficulty, I really can't say one is more difficult than the other because they're just different challenges. I think that as far as even coming up with story ideas, if I get an assignment, it's usually a kind of a specific thing. Like just recently I wrote prequel novel for Star Wars Rebels, Ezra's Gamble, published by Disney Publishing, or Disney Lucasfilm Press. And so, the parameters were I got an assignment, write a story about Ezra Bridger before he meets the other members of this Rebels team. So, just in the course of conversation with Lucasfilm's story group that we talked about what we could do, and then I write it. With the technical manuals, it's definitely a much more collaborative effort with the artist, so that when I'm sort of on some degree on my own once I get to go ahead for a novel, but with every single 2-page spread on a technical manual, the artist and I have a lot of conversations about it.
Are you interpreting what the artist tells you, or it's a collaborative effort, like you said, where you each kind of give and take a little bit?
It's very collaborative. We each at the beginning of a project will come up with lists of things that we want in the book. I will do a breakdown for page what we think, how everything should be laid out in the book, so that. But with working with Chris Trevis, Chris Reif, also known as the Chris's. It's funny because they'll draw something and I'll think, oh, that I could maybe write more about this, or I'll write something and they'll say, gee, maybe we can build up this aspect. So it's very, we do play off each other as we work.
I know you have I believe the Bounty Hunter Code guide coming out in the next few days.
Yes.
How's that in terms of being different also from your traditional books?
Well, it's that was also a very collaborative project because we were working. I was working with Dan Wallace and Jason Fry on that, and we each took it into different chapters. But even with that book, golly, it was. I think my most significant contributions to that project was my idea that the case, the package for the original edition, that it should be a Mandalorian ammo box of some kind, and also that I thought having Kratos' memoirs. So I wrote all of Kratos' memoirs. Because I thought, that might be an interesting thing.
I can't wait to read that one. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos.
Up next, we have the panel for Ryder Windham.
Just this morning, I got there's a Star Wars fan here, Carlos. We met earlier, and he was he likes my work on
the technical
manuals, Death Star, and Millennium Falcon
Haynes
manuals.
books.
Haynes manuals, which, if you've ever been in the automotive section of a bookstore and you see there's how to fix your Volkswagen or your whatever, Subaru, okay, Haynes manuals now, they do fantasy stuff. So you can, if you've got a Millennium Falcon in your garage, you go to this, you get this book, you can get it out, get it up and flying again. And with those books, all of them are very carefully researched, where, I go through old role-playing game books or other technical manuals. Just this morning, I got a letter from a guy saying, I scratch-built a model of a YT-1000. The Millennium Falcon is a YT-1300. But he said, I scratch-built a YT-1000. And he sent a couple of photographs. I thought, God, that looks fantastic. But I also thought, he mentioned that he was inspired by some drawings in the book, but I'm looking at it and thinking, I vaguely remember, okay, so then I look at the book, and indeed the YT-1000 is featured in the book, but I'm still wondering, who made up that thing? I've dug out my original manuscript, which has my footnotes, and I found out, oh, I made it up. And the reason I made it up was that we needed some kind of an initial history. The artist and I agreed that we needed something as sort of a starting point for this YT series. But there were other vehicles that we incorporated from various games. But the YT-1000, I think it had been mentioned in a novel before, but it had never been drawn. So we thought that appealed to us. We knew it existed, but that we wanted to make it happen. So this is all to say, I've forgotten half of the things I've invented for Star Wars. It's been a long time. And let's see, there's a new series coming up, Star Wars Rebels, which is Lucasfilm Animation is producing it, and they've already got some clips that are on Disney XD. I sound like I'm shilling for them now, don't I? And in case you're wondering too, I don't get royalties off these books. I mention that because many people think, because I've written a lot of Star Wars books, they must think, whoa, you could just must be rolling in it. It's like, no, I get paid well for what I do, but it's per project. I just get I would liken myself to a mechanic. Ryder, can you work on this thing for us? Yeah, I can do that. When do you need it? How much is it? What's the deadline? But as opposed to, say, somebody who designs Maseratis and actually sells them and whatnot, I'm just a hired gun. So last year, I can talk about this now because I was sworn to secrecy for months, but now it's all out there that I was contacted by Lucasfilm, and they said, well, we're working on something called Star Wars Rebels, and I said, yeah, I know that much. They said, we have a new character named Ezra Bridger, and he's a young thief, and I think he's 14 years old, and he lives on the planet Lotholis. It's a new planet, and the planet is controlled by the Empire. Would you be interested in working on this? And you know what my answer was, and it's like, okay, but what I quickly found out was that because of the secrecy and whatnot, I mean, they were so reluctant to give me anything. I said, I need to, can you, look, it would be very helpful if I just had one photo, or an illustration, something, a sketch of the kid. So, and also I said this planet that he's on, they sent me the script for one episode, so I would maybe get a feel for the dialogue. And and they sent me a few illos, and that was it. And I immediately thought, when I read the thing, because they specifically wanted a prequel story. This is a story, they said, it takes place before young Ezra Bridger meets the other characters who will be featured in the TV series. I said, great, so now he's on his own. That's not very interesting. They even mentioned, they said, he's kind of like, think Disney's Aladdin, or the Artful Dodger. And I said, yeah, but even those guys had someone to talk to. There's the chimp, or there's Oliver. They're like, he's just this. And I also thought too, it's like, why should I like this kid? I know nothing about him, and I'm also not allowed to. I mean, they gave me some information about his backstory, but they also said, oh, we don't want to give away too much. So it's like, what have I got? I've got a young 14-year-old thief on a planet that I'm told, if it were on Tatooine, it'd be done already. So I started thinking about like how can this be entertaining to me, I guess, but also to, I would hope, to Star Wars fans. And because I thought if he needs someone to talk to, and it needs to be somebody interesting. Someone who's good with banter and maybe good in a fight also. And I thought he really needs a bounty hunter. And I considered Boba Fett, but then I thought that could become, I just imagined there could be problems. And without even going into details, I thought, for all I know, and I don't know anything, and I stressed that. I thought, for all I know, Boba Fett may have a cameo in an upcoming episode of Star Wars Rebels, or maybe he's going to be featured in the movies. I don't know. I'm not being coy. I stress that. I have no idea. But what I did suspect was that Bosk would maybe be an easier character for them to approve to say yes or no. And so it was a conference call that included Dave Filoni, who is the supervising director for. He was on the Clone Wars as well as on Star Wars Rebels, and Dave responded with, yeah, Bosk, I think that could work. So, and as he said, and he pointed out, or he mentioned, he said, well, and Bosk was featured in the Clone Wars, so it could kind of tie in with that. And I said, yeah, and because you've got some 3D model of him, we can put Bosk and Ezra Bridger on the cover of this book, and it will entice readers. It will make them curious. It will because instead of just thinking, who's that kid? They're going to look at it and think, Bosk is with that kid. And so, anyway, everyone thought it was a swell idea. Did they tip me? No. But they did seem to appreciate it. And the book was just released.
Do you think, because now George Lucas is not directly involved with the stories being told in Rebels, that Disney gives you a little more free range as a writer to explore areas where in the past Lucas might say, no, you can't touch these characters, you can't touch those characters?
It's, I had so much leeway on the story that I wrote with Bosk in it. I mean, that, as far as, I mean, that story, it's like, yes, it is, that story is owned by Disney Lucasfilm, absolutely, but that, they gave me Ezra Bridger, Lothal, it was my idea to do Bosk. The entire story, the whole thing, what it's about. No one at any point. The only thing that came up after I turned in the first draft, the editor at Lucasfilm said, "We think there are a couple of parts here where it would be better if Ezra were a little bit more proactive, because Bosk is doing so much cool stuff because he's Bosk. But that we think that what if Ezra could have, instead of it's Bosk's idea to do this, what if Ezra does something here?" And I said, yeah, that makes sense. I understood immediately. They wanted to play up their character. It made sense to do that.
Question. So I read recently that, and I don't remember actually in the context if it was everything or just the upcoming movie, but in Disney's mind, they're going to ignore the extended universe of Star Wars.
Yes.
In your opinion, what do you think the impact that would be for writers like you and for other people who are really big fans of the extended universe?
Over the past decades, it goes back to, say, Marvel Comics. There are all these comic book stories, many novels that have been published and at some point in time, Lucasfilm, or maybe it was a publisher, or maybe it was a fan, somebody started referring to them as the expanded universe stories. And a few months ago, Lucasfilm announced that essentially all the expanded universe stories, the way they phrased it, it's not so much that they were null and void. It was more like, okay, we've got a clean slate here, that all of these previously published stories we're now categorizing as Star Wars legends. And then these new stories that we're working on, these are going to be called the canon stories. So the question is, how do I feel about that? Because, essentially I've been doing this for over 20 years, and a lot of this stuff that I've worked on, now it seems like, oh yeah, that's not, it's not canon anymore. I'm not fazed by that at all. And in fact, in 1998, when I read the screenplay for episode 1, several months before it came out, I read that and I thought, oh, that completely changes everything we know about the Jedi Order. Everything that all these books and comics, everything. I said, why? Now at the time, I don't think I knew about the word reboot. I think it's like, so is there going to be a do-over? But no, what happened was writers seemed to try to struggle to make sense and to tie things together, even though they didn't really, things did not really mesh well. To be fair, things don't mesh well in the Star Wars movies. There's a lot of weird loose ends. It will probably always bug me that Owen Lars in Star Wars, I still think of it as Star Wars. Some people call it A New Hope. Oh well, but that when Owen Lars meets 3PO, does he think this droid talks just like that droid that lived on my farm for about 9 years or so? Talks just like that C-3PO droid. Does he? It's like no, just one. And I asked the response I got from a guy at Lucasfilm was like, well, protocol droids are fairly common in the galaxy. I said, not on Tatooine and the outskirts. So that the lines of George Lucas can't seem to decide, depending on which dialogue you listen to, where the Jedi serve the Republic for 1,000 years or 1,000 generations. There's a difference. Read your own scripts. Be consistent. So anyway, I think that as far as the clean slate thing, I mentioned I don't get royalties on this. So I think, those books that I wrote a long time ago, they don't really count. I just think, well, the only ones that really interest me more are my next assignments. So that it seems, so from my selfish perspective, from the reader's perspective, does that mean you can't like certain books anymore? No. Another sort of historic point.
Well, I guess really what I was asking is more of your opinion of what it means for the future of that. Will there still be potential for writing, even though it's considered the legend, that the legend will still continue, or do you see it really? They're just kind of saying this is it. We've closed the chapter and everything's
consider that, say with episode 7. If the movie starts off at a certain point where it's maybe we realize, okay, things have transpired within the past whatever, maybe 30 years or so. I imagine there will be prequel stories. I think that people will they'll see. But I mean, just sort of going back a ways. When I was a little shaver, I was 13 when Star Wars came out, or maybe 12. It was a busy year. I read I saw Star Wars. The following year, 1978, I read the novel Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster. Is anyone familiar with that? Okay. So Splinter of the Mind's Eye takes place after the events of the first Star Wars movie, and in that movie, there's a sequence where Luke, Leia, and the droids have an encounter with Darth Vader. So now I didn't know how that book came about. I just thought, well, it's a Star Wars story, and I read it. I thought it was great. So a few years later, Empire Strikes Back came out, and I can't deny, because I was a kid, I'm sitting there thinking, are they going to mention the sequence in Splinter of the Mind's Eye? It's like, no, they didn't. And the reason was that Splinter of the Mind's Eye was conceived of as a possible sequel to Star Wars if Star Wars did not do so well financially. This would be a low-budget. Splinter of the Mind's Eye was conceived as a low-budget movie that could be filmed in a swamp, and would with lots of steam rising. Harrison Ford had only signed on for one movie. He was not in. His character is not featured in Splinter of the Mind's Eye for that reason. So it's sort of like years later, I put it all together about, okay, that's why Splinter of the Mind's Eye was the way it was. Do I think then it's like, oh, that story doesn't count anymore? I think, no, actually, the story behind the story, as far as how, I think that explains how it came to be. But on its own, I mean, if you just read it, is it a good, fun adventure story with Star Wars characters? And I'd say, yeah. I mean, and granted, I read it with this sort of nostalgic, I've got that lens on the thing. But it's, but there will still be opportunities for writing expanded universe things. Yes.
Quick question. In Star Wars, this is a weird one. During the trench battle, Porkins is asked to eject, and he doesn't eject.
He does not.
In your personal opinion, because you've written so many of these technical manuals, do you think the X-Wings might have a ejection pod, or do you think the pilots could eject and stay in space for a little while?
I worked with artists Chris Trevis and Chris Reif on the blueprints that included the X-Wing, and essentially it's sort of, I think the plan was that the cockpit, that was sort of ejectable, but that it's also, I can't remember, it's like the pressure suit or a seal, there was something that they, I can't remember the details. They figured it out. I just had to write text to sort of make it work, but they did have something in there that, I guess that one technically could eject and survive, but I can't remember how. I'd have to consult one of my own books.
Next is another panel event that I went to, and that was with actor William Katt from, if you guys are as old as I am, might remember him from The Greatest American Hero. He was the star of the show. And, he was able to tell us some stories about how the show was put together, some of its stars, and again, I was also able to ask him a question from a slight Star Wars angle, which was kind of cool, but that was also pretty interesting.
As an actor coming into this, how did you approach the role of just everyman Ralph Heasley?
I always played it, and I always thought of it, but my type of comedy is not over the top. I try to play my comedy as a real man in an absurd situation, and that's the way I play it.
And then you mentioned the late great Robert Culp.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got to talk about him. I like those early scenes, especially in the pilot. If you haven't seen the pilot, or if you haven't seen the series, please go get the DVDs and enjoy it. Yeah, but it's one of the strongest pilots out there, and I love the scenes between the two of you because it wasn't just acting. Correct?
No. Robert and I, when we first started the show, we didn't much care for each other, and to put it mildly.
But your characters didn't either.
But the great thing is the characters didn't either. But we were forced to work in this situation, and very much like the TV series, we became very good friends in very short time. Both learning, earning the other's respect professionally, and then that spilled over into our personal lives. And Bob became a very good friend of mine, and I would like to say I was a friend of his.
Yeah, he's amazing. I mean, his performance, just the two of you, and again, Connie Selica, we throw that in, the
gorgeous, beautiful, very talented Connie Selica, who was not going to be a part of the TV series, and the late great Steve Cannell talks about this. She was only brought on to do the pilot. But at the end of the dailies in the first week, the chemistry was so strong between the three of us that he called her agent and the network, and they made an overall series deal with Connie. And they kept her in the show.
Well, it was interesting too is that she has another comic book connection because she was in the second Captain America pilot.
Oh wow!
And then if that had taken off, the series, which it was supposed to, she may have been tied up for that. So because that didn't work out, we actually got her a couple of years later on Greatest American Hero. So,
wow!
But the three of you, talk about the dynamic between the three of you because it just. I mean, it's one of those things, lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. But
it just works. How did that come about? How organic was it? How prepared? I know you had table reads going into the episodes.
Well, I hadn't really met Connie until we started shooting. Bob I had met briefly, but I had no, we didn't have any idea who was going to be working with who. It was just one of those serendipitous things where the three of us just worked. That chemistry worked. It's one of those things that you hope to happen as a producer or a casting agent. You hope to get that. And that's when you get these kind of iconic movies or television series that just work. For instance, Friends, or How I Met Your Mom, or those types of series. You just, X-Files, you get this chemistry that you hoped you'd get, but there was no way you could have planned for it.
Yeah, and there's that one scene even in the pilot between you and Robert Culp too. Because I think the problem his character had was that he didn't get the suit.
Right.
He was upset that Ralph Hinckley, every man, got the suit, and he was the agent. He was the crime fighter. He was the one supposed to get it. It's almost like he should have been in charge, and you were the main guy. So it kind of played out even in the series because you're obviously the first name we see in the credits.
Yeah.
And Robert Culp had been doing a lot of TV shows over that time.
Yeah.
So had you guys talked about that? Offset, okay.
No, we didn't talk about that. We just did it because I was, a confident young actor. No one was going to really tell me what to do, and Bob thought otherwise. And you laugh. That's exactly what happened. That's what happened.
And that's where we see the series.
There was a great scene that we did in the bathroom of the high school where he comes to see me, and he's telling me how it's going to be, and I refute that, and I tell him, no, you don't have it. That's not exactly what's going to transpire.
Yeah, he's always saying, "I'm in charge of the kid."
Yeah, I'm in charge of the kid.
I'm in charge of the kid. No, the kid is in charge of the kid.
Yeah,
because you're the one with the suit.
Yeah.
Now, talk about the suit itself. Obviously, you're taking on this role. Stephen Cannell talks to you about it. You see it ahead of time.
Yeah.
When do you see the suit? When is the first time you're in it and you go, "Oh"?
One of the first times I saw the suit. Well, you see it in the pilot when I have to put it on, and I look at myself in the mirror for the first time. And I kind of say, "Hi, sailor." That was funny. I was looking in that mirror, and I was thinking to myself, the way Ralph was thinking to himself, "Oh my gosh," and I was thinking to myself, "Oh my gosh, there goes my career." That's what Bill Katt was thinking. Yeah.
And so when you took that on, you didn't think it was going to go past pilot stage, or maybe even.
We thought we were going to do pilot and four shows maybe.
So you're okay with the suit?
The order was typically a pilot, and they order 4 shows. That's what they do, and they see how that goes. And then if the ratings are good, then they order more shows.
A lot of Superman references early on.
Yeah.
Were you a comic book fan? Did you enjoy comic books?
Yeah.
Heroes? Did you channel any of those?
Loved comic books. Always a reader and a fan of comic books from the time I was 11, 12 years old.
Now, the flying sequences too. I mean, obviously today we've got CGI. It's very easy to do flying scenes, very easy to see Man of Steel, very easy to do realistic flying scenes. Not so much back in the early 80s. Yeah. It was a little bit more low tech. Now, we have the Superman movie with Christopher Reeve. Those types of things were in play, but how did your flying scenes work, and how much of the schedule took up just the flying scenes?
Well, typically every week, I'd be flying. and Connie and Bob would have a day off every week. We'd shoot 7 days a show. So we go Monday through Friday, we'd be off Saturday and Sunday, and then Monday and Tuesday, and that would be a full show. Well, typically one of those days was devoted to me on a big giant blue stage, flying, being pulled up by piano wires and zooming across the stage, and they would composite that in with a background. But that was the first year. The second year, by that second year, we had the beginning of the computer age, because they started, the blue screen became a green screen, and I would sit on a green board and the camera would move around me instead of me moving around the camera. That's how things changed.
And then of course you had to practice screaming different levels of screaming. There's always different pitches that we watched in different episodes, depending on whether you're going to plow into a wall, into a tree. So, who did you channel for those screams? Those old horror Carrie days coming back on that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right, well, how about anybody out in the audience? Do you have some questions? We can take some questions.
Yes.
We go through all the way in the back.
In the casting process for Carrie, it's widely known that you were also auditioning for other movies. Is that a common thing, that you go into an audition and you're auditioning for different directors?
It's the only time I can think of it that I had that particular type of audition, where I saw two directors produce two different movies at the same time. Sometimes when you go in to do regional theater and whatnot, you're going to do a season with a rep company. You'll be auditioning and they'll be looking at you for multiple roles in that season at that particular playhouse. But I've never had that experience in film in my 40-odd-something year career. That was pretty unique, I think.
Can you tell everybody who you were auditioning for?
Yeah, that was when I auditioned for, they were doing two films. Carrie was being cast, and they were also casting a little-known film called Star Wars. And so we read originally for George Lucas, I met with, and Brian De Palma at the same time. Now, I'm not going to say that I was the only one there. I mean, they were looking at every young, up-and-coming actor in Hollywood, anyone that had some street cred at the time. So I ended up doing an audition with Kurt Russell on our third audition. We memorized lines and we did a reading for camera. We didn't get the role. Kurt Russell just, I don't know why he went into the business in the first place. He never really had it. What's going to become of that guy?
What was the most challenging aspect for you of shooting this series? Because you're in every shot. It's you.
That was the most challenging aspect, was the time. When you do a single show, single camera, as they call it, single camera show, and you're the lead, you're working literally 14 to 16 hours every day, so you never see your family or friends. And that's why people, these celebrities, they have their assistants you hear about, because they literally don't have any time to do anything, So that's the hardest part about doing a one-camera show.
Is there a particular genre or medium that you haven't tried yet that you wish you could?
No, I've been pretty lucky. The only thing that scares me would be doing stand-up. I think that that's very scary. I'm not that kind of an actor. That the kind of improv that I do is I have to have boundaries, the context. I have to have a script to springboard off of. I can't stand up in front of an audience and do stand-up or anything. That freaks me out.
Is there more Broadway, do you think, in your future?
I'd love to do more theater if I can. I love the theater. I haven't had a chance to do that for quite some time.
The last interview we have was with Mitch Hallock, who is the promoter-producer of the actual convention. I was able to ask him a couple of quick questions there of how, he put the convention together and the type of guests he has and that sort of thing. Hi, we're here with Mitch Hallock at Connecticut ComiCONN, and we just had a wonderful time with the family. We were here Friday a little bit, and we came back here today, Sunday. Mitch, you're a marketing professional, a promoter. You run this convention, basically, and you're also a podcaster. Tell me, how do you think it's going so far?
Beyond my wildest dreams. It's exhausting. It's great. It's exciting. There's a lot of energy here, but it's a home run. Love it. Everybody's happy. Everybody's smiling, and that's the best thing you could ask for.
It seems every year it seems to be growing and growing and growing. How long do you think you can handle this location?
I just got here, and I'm already outgrown. I was like the Hulk, you know? We used to do hotels, and we went to bigger hotels, and we went to bigger hotels, and I'm like, let's do an arena. But geez, if they had a double this size, I could fill that too.
Fill it.
Yeah.
Comparing this to, for example, the San Diegos and the New York ComiCONs, what do you think this makes it a little more special as far as for the fans goes? Not so much for the big studios and the big movie stars, but for the fans. How is this different?
It's all about intimacy. We're not that big where there's 100,000. I would love to have 100,000 in my bank account. My accountant would love it. But it's one of those things, it's the old-time comic book cons where you can actually go up to the writers, the artists, sit and talk to them, talk about a particular issue that they did and say how great it is. And that type of thing is still alive and well here at Connecticut ComiCON, where a lot of the bigger shows have kind of lost that. Mm-hmm. They've kind of grown so big, they're out of touch with their fan base. I mean, they're still doing great shows, don't get me wrong, but you can't walk up to a certain person at one of those shows, just, hey, how are you? I love what you did on Daredevil 22 or something like that, but you could do that here.
I'll tell you, one of the most amazing things I found here is one of your guests, the actor for the Avengers.
Yeah, Max Hernandez.
The guy was signing for free.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, what is this, 1985? Yeah. What year is this? I have never seen this since back in my con days in New York back in the early 80s.
Absolutely. And Max and I talked about it because I know that's what some folks do. They charge for autographs and photos and such. And I said, what do you want to do? He goes, oh, no, man, I don't charge. I was like, yeah, but you were in Captain America 2. You were in the Avengers, you were S.H.I.E.L.D. He goes, yeah, I know, and I'm grateful for my career and my life. So I understand a guy's got to work, pay the money to park, pay the money to get in, get a hot dog and stuff. I'm good. And, fans were floored by that,
I was amazed. And as far as I'm concerned, you won us over. We can't wait for next year. We can't wait for whatever comes next.
Already got the dates, August 14th to the 16th, 2015.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now, while there, as I mentioned before, the biggest draw to this convention was the dealer room. The fact that they were able to basically blanket the entire floor of the auditorium with tables was great if you're into, looking for bargains and that sort of thing. All types of toys. I mean, it went from vintage to brand new, you name it. And like I said before, it's a mid-size convention. We have covered, on our show all these years, the smaller type, toy show type of conventions, which we still do. For example, with the New Jersey Toy Con type of setups and the humongous monster size, New York ComiCONs and celebrations and that sort of thing. This kind of falls right in the middle. It's a large location, not a ridiculously huge celebrity type of attendance, but even without that, we were able to get a couple of autographs with my son, especially one he got from Maximiliano Hernandez from a lot of the Marvel films, including Avengers and Thor. He was there giving away free autographs, which was incredible, and I talk about it with Mitch. And it was a good, kind of fun way to spend the afternoon, hanging out at a convention. Not super crowded. I would say crowded enough. I think they had a good turnout. It wasn't too crazy in terms of New York ComiCON size, that you can't get through certain aisles. No, here you could comfortably kind of walk most of the aisles without having to wait too long to get through them. And like I mentioned before, a great selection of all kinds of toys. If you're into action figures or whatever the heck you're into, comics and movies and this and that, there was plenty for people to pick from. Some of their other celebrity guests that they had were Ray Park, which we have met before once at a different convention, Brian O'Halloran from the movie Clerks, a couple of the guys from Comic Book Man, speaking of Kevin Smith, plus from The Toy Hunter, Jordan Hembrough, and our buddy Steven Savino, who is also from our offshoot show, Crazy Toy World. There were also tons and tons of comic book people, too many to mention. And this is also one of the reasons why it made it more of a traditional, if you think of Comic-Con, a convention about comics, not the new type of Comic-Cons that you experience these days, but the comic book artist presence was huge. So again, if you're into comic books, this was a great way to be able to find merchandise and meet some of these writers and artists. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. I'd like to specifically thank Mitch Hallock for the access he gave us to the convention and the great interview that we were able to do with him, and Ryder Windham and Steven Savino. I hope next year we can come back, and would definitely recommend our viewers to visit Connecticut ComiCONN. We had a great time. And, you know, if you're into conventions, this is something that's a little different, if you will. It's, like I said before, it's a medium-sized convention. Like Mitch mentioned on the interview, it doesn't have that sprawling kind of feel that you're just kind of like lost in the sea of a convention. It's a little more intimate than your big-sized conventions. And if you're into dealer rooms, if you're into, you know, being a little more up close and personal with some of their guests, this is the perfect place for you. So until next time, on behalf of everybody here at GeekFest Rants, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
What on earth is going on?
If I told you, you'd sign my commitment form.
Oh, try me. I have a very broad mind.
Won't be broad enough, believe me.
Ralph, I dearly care about you. I love you. I wouldn't tell you this now, but I think I have a heavy emotional stake in your future.
That's terrific, Pam. And I feel the same way about you. I really do. I mean, after this custody thing was over...
Ralph, talk to me, please.
Well, I was gonna...
We'll deal with it together, whatever it is.
Are you sure?
I'm ready. I can handle anything.
Okay. Last night, I was approached by a flying saucer out in the desert. Anyway, this saucer, they talked to us over the car radio. And Bill's partner, he's a G-man. He came out of the saucer, but he was dead. And he had this package under his arm, and he gave it to me. And there were instructions on how to use the suit, but I lost them, and I tried to fly to the courthouse because I was in this terrible traffic jam, but I couldn't fly straight. And I went into this wall, and I got hauled off and arrested. It's a 20 on the Richter scale, isn't it? You should try it from where I sit. I mean, I could kill the guy who designed this suit. Why couldn't it have narrow lapels and a cutaway jacket? Why did it have to be long johns and a cape? I put this thing on, I feel like I'm 6 years old.